Hey everybody, seventh angel of Revelation. Today I wanted to talk about this that I had wrote down. I got a lot of stuff in notebooks, but I really felt that I should share this with y'all, man. It's about Elijah and his fear, and I feel like it relates completely with me and things that I've gone through in life, and things that we all go through in life. As far as fear. Um, Elijah's story on Mount Carmel is just amazing to me. I've read it over and over, and you know, for the greatest prophet in the whole Bible to run from fear, it really just puzzled me. It really just I just dove into it, and the more I read it, the more I went over it, the more I see things in Elijah's story, that relates to my life. As the two witnesses, it's exactly like the two witnesses in the fact that he has to deal with his fear. And that's something that God has to do with every one of his prophets. Every prophet of the Lord has to deal with fear. Every single one of them. Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. He was afraid. I mean, he just really he was running from the call. So fear. Moses, he didn't want to go. He said three or four times, "Not me. Don't send me. Don't send me." Moses is a big one, because Moses ran from fear his whole life, I see fear as like the biggest thing that we deal with throughout the whole Bible, especially in prophets. Especially in prophets. And the reason being is because of what God has to put the prophet through in order to make him the prophet, He has to purge all of that fear away, and there cannot be any fear left. There cannot be any fear left in the prophet. But the story of Mount Carmel, I wrote some things down about that, but I'm gonna share it with y'all. Elijah overcomes his fear of Jezebel and his fear of death, the power of witchcraft and darkness. See, there's multiple things that Elijah's overcoming here. What scared Elijah the most was her words, the way she used her words, and the way Jezebel used her words toward Elijah. It absolutely terrified him, and he was scared. He put him in fear. Regardless of the miracle he had just done, Jezebel spoke them words, and that witchcraft and darkness, it just paralyzed him, and he ran for his life. But I see something else in that part as well. He ran for his life. It says that Elijah ran for his life. So Elijah was in fear because he didn't want to die. He didn't want to lose his life. He did not want to lose his life, and this is something that God has to deal with every prophet, because there's not a prophet that I know of who doesn't get killed. There's not a prophet that I know of that does not get killed, except for Enoch. Enoch was taken away. Enoch is actually like one of the only prophets where God took him away and he didn't get killed. But every other prophet in the whole Bible, they kill him. They kill him. But it's something that they have to go through their whole life. The prophet has to deal with fear their whole life. And a lot of it has to come from, God is telling you to proclaim a message that the people do not want to hear. The light. When Jesus came as the prophet, he was proclaiming the light. And they did not want to hear it. They didn't want to hear it. They were in darkness. Darkness did not want to hear the light. And John 3:19, it says that this is the condemnation. Light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light. So when God sends his prophet, he's basically sending the light into nothing but darkness. and they go through a lot of stuff. They're rejected and put down, and they're hated, and they're just doing what God has sent them to do. This is what they are. This is what God made them, and they have to do what God told them to do. And it always ends bad for the prophet. They get killed because darkness hates the light. And the cross, when they came to get Jesus and put him on that cross, the darkness was coming for the light. It came for the light, and it came to kill the light. It came to get rid of the light. But while he was here, he proclaimed the message. He proclaimed the message to this world that saved this world. So while we're here, while the prophet's here, while God is wanting to use us, while the light is here, say what we had to say. Tell the people the truth. Tell them the light. Be the light anyway, whether they don't like it or not. Whether they hate you and want to kill you, you tell them anyway. Because look, had Jesus not told them all those things, look at what it did. So speak the truth no matter what, even in death. Speak the truth, because it has an impact. It has an impact. People hate, people don't like it, but the light has an impact on this world. And look at the impact that Jesus Christ had on this world, that the light had on this world. But I'm going to get back to Elijah, y'all. Prophets in fear. Prophets in fear. He had to get to a point with Elijah. Elijah had to get to a point where he was no longer scared of Jezebel, witchcraft, and it had no power over him. Her words did not scare him. And the exact same thing I've had to go through, y'all. I've had to go through this same exact process where the words would scare me. The words would make me run. The words would make me have fear, and I would run. I would run from the witchcraft. I would run from the darkness. And I couldn't figure out why. For a long time, why do I keep running from this? And then reading Elijah's story, I realized, because God has to deal with that fear. And God wants to deal with that fear, Elijah. And he dealt with it. He dealt with it in Elijah, and he dealt with it in me. He got me to a point where I no longer run from fear. I no longer run from witchcraft. It no longer has power over me to scare me. Jezebel no longer scares me anymore, So I no longer run from Jezebel. I used to run from Jezebel. I no longer run from Jezebel anymore. And God had to get Elijah to that point, before he could use him. Before Elijah could, be the greatest prophet. All fear had to be purged away. And at this time, prophets were being killed. A lot of people were dying. And Elijah stops running from his fears. He faces them, and he becomes an overcomer of the spirit of death. And I believe the prophet must be an overcomer of the spirit of death. There's a point that the prophet must come to where he has to face death, look it in the eye, and say, I'm not running from you no more. And if you die, you die. And we can remember that Elijah came to that point. He prayed to God that he would die. Take my life away. And when Elijah got to that point, when he prayed to God that God would take his life away, because Elijah, his prayer is so powerful. When he prayed that to God, I mean, literally, he should have died. But God was dealing with Elijah's fear. And so he became not afraid of death anymore. He was so far in the darkness. He was so far in pain. This is why darkness for the prophet is what God uses to purge them of their fear. He brought Elijah to a point where he was just fed up and he was through. I'm done, God. Take my life away. And when he came to that point where he didn't care about his life no more, because remember, he ran for his life. But when Elijah came to that point where he no longer cared about his life anymore, I give up. I give up. All fear went away. All fear went away, and he overcame death. So Jezebel had no more power over Elijah then, when he left that cave. And I had to do the same thing. Jezebel has no more power over me in fear, no more. I've been in the cave. I've been in that darkness, and God put me through the fire. And, put me in a situation where you can't run. You can't run. You can't run this time. You got to face death. And at the time, I was scared. I was scared, and I was full of fear. But he said, have faith in me. Have faith in me. And don't run. Don't run. And don't have fear. And when I did that, I overcame it. And I believe that's how the spirit of death is overcome, and we see that in the world now, y'all. This is relevant now. The coronavirus people are so afraid. They're afraid. They're just afraid of a virus. I mean, imagine someone standing there with a knife at your throat about to kill you. That's fear. But the coronavirus, come on, y'all. Have more faith in God than that. Don't fear a virus. And it says in the Bible, you shouldn't fear a man that can only take your body away from you. A man that can only kill you. You better fear the man who can take your soul and your body away from you. So only fear God. Man cannot take... Man should not be feared. But Satan loves to use men to make people walk in fear, to make them instill fear in them, and he does that as a tactic. He thinks it's funny, but now, y'all, I just look at the demons and laugh because it ain't scary no more, And something else, y'all. Just don't run. You never run. And the devil's game is for you to run. Because when you run in fear, you're in Satan's will. And that's when he leads you into a trap. That's when he leads you to death. So, if you're ever in that situation, y'all, and you're scared and you're in fear, sit there and face it. And listen to what God's telling you. Sit there. Be still. Because Satan wants you to make a sudden move, and he wants you to move out of fear. And if you move out of fear, you're out of God's will. Because fear is not in God's will. So stand in faith when you face fear. Let's see. The Lord sends this one prophet into the midst of this witchcraft and death. Elijah stands in the midst of the prophets of Baal and confronts them and even mocks them. Now remember, he runs. He runs for his life, y'all. But in this moment, look what he's doing. He's mocking them. He stands in the midst of all of them, just one man. And he mocks them. He confronts them. He makes fire come down from heaven, and he stands for the Lord without being scared of their witchcraft. He was surrounded by 450 prophets that could have killed him at any moment. But this part right here shows me that when the power of the Lord, the zealousy of the Lord that Elijah had, fear went out the window. don't care about them. I don't care about them. I'm here to prove God is real. And I'm here to tell them that they have to make a choice. And fear was the last thing on Elijah's mind. Only God was on Elijah's mind. So when God is the only thing on your mind, and jealousy and passion, there's no fear there. There's no fear there. Even when you're surrounded by 450 prophets of Baal that can kill you, if you are standing with the Lord, there's no fear. And Elijah just confronts them, mocks them like it ain't nothing. But then he runs from one woman. So there's a lot to see there, y'all. Like, there's a lot there. He didn't run from 450 grown men, false prophets, but he ran from one woman. And it has to do with Jezebel, it has to do with witchcraft. But also Elijah had actually not fully listened to what the Lord told him to do at Mount Carmel. Because God actually told Elijah, he said, go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. That's all God told Elijah to do. And somehow Elijah ends up on Mount Carmel with 450 prophets and making fire come down from heaven, and all this is going on. But if you go back, I think it's what is that? 1 Kings 17, 18. Go back there, you'll see. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. God never told Elijah to do any of that at Mount Carmel. So I believe a lot of the fear, that came from Jezebel was because after Elijah got done doing all that, he kind of knew that he didn't listen to God. He didn't listen to God completely. What he did was right. But if we step out of God's will in him, and he did when he didn't listen fully to what the Lord told him, fear was able to come into Elijah through Jezebel. And when he gets to the cave, God says, what are you doing here, Elijah? He said, I was zealous for you, God. I was zealous for you. So, Elijah did it out of zealousy. He did it because he loved the Lord so much. He wanted to prove that God was real. But sometimes, it made Jezebel mad. It made Jezebel mad. And Elijah knew that he really wasn't supposed to do that. But he did it for a good reason. But when he goes to the cave, he learns a lesson, and he learns the most important lesson in his whole life. The same lesson that I've been learning and that I have to learn. Listening. Elijah struggled with listening. He struggled with listening. And that's why when the Lord told him to just go and present yourself to Ahab, he didn't do it because Elijah didn't listen. He struggled with it,